My name is Ed Gerstner. I'm the Executive Editor and Chief Advocate of Open Research in Greater China for Nature Journals. I have many roles. One is wrangling a bunch of editors and trying to grow the editorial presence in China so that we can better understand China and that hopefully China can better understand how to get their research published and get their messages across. But in the open part of my remit as chief advocate, I kind of travel around China trying to espouse the value, the worth, the power of open sharing. And it's not just about open access, it's not just about papers, it's about data, it's about protocols, it's about methods, it's about open collaboration. And there is a lot, you might be surprised to know, there is a lot of hunger for more openness and a surprising amount of acceptance of openness. We did an analysis of the papers published in Nature Communications before it went fully open access, when it was a hybrid journal. And the two top countries that took up open access when they didn't have to in Nature Communications were the UK and Germany. Actually, they did have to because their funders told them they have to. Third was China, and no one told the Chinese they had to publish their papers open access. So they already get a lot of it. But there are many challenges in trying to get them to open up their data. So one of the things I'm trying to do is to lobby governments, lobby funders to build policies that encourage, possibly even mandate or open data. Anyway, around the ideas of open and innovation and collaboration, we have some very interesting panelists here, and I don't want to necessarily just talk about open. One of the things that had occurred to me that is emerging from this conference is one of participation. Open doesn't matter unless people are using and sharing and collaborating with these open systems, with these open sources of knowledge, of information. And so the theme that I've decided for this panel will be one of participation. I'm going to ask the panelists, how does the idea of participation connect with what they care about? And it's not just participation, it's about buy-in, it's about involvement. Participation in as general a sense as we can. So I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves, talk for 2 minutes, explaining who they are and why they care about participation, or not even. So let's start with James.
Hello, I'm James Carlson. Back in 2002 in the US, in the middle part, that's between the east and west coasts, I started the first makerspace in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called Bucketworks. And it was a mixture of places where you could sort of build and create and make just about anything you wanted to make. 6 main dimensions of programming that we focus on: art, theater and dance, business, technology, and leadership. And the biggest challenge we had was, in the theme of participation, trying to get people to come through the door. Because if we put things on the front of the door that say things like, come in and make art, most people will say, oh no, I can't, I'm not an artist, I don't know how to do that. If we say, come in and make a business, most people will say, no, I mean, entrepreneurship is for people who are crazy. I'm not crazy, I'll stay in W-2 land and just stay employed, and that's good. And so we had to invent all these clever ways to do art and do technology and do leadership without telling anyone that's what we were doing. And then after they did it, we'd say, by the way, you were just making art. Really? Oh my gosh! And that's how we would get them in their hearts. And so it was very tricky, especially in a place like Milwaukee, where it's very conservative, very kind of risk-averse, Germanic culture. We must know the future, or we cannot go there kind of place. And so my passion since is in helping many other of these kind of emergent learning communities form around the world. How do we make the door so wide open that anyone feels in their heart specifically, not usually their mind, but their heart, that they can come through and play and be open to explore and discover what's inside these places and inside of themselves. And that's the biggest challenge I think we have. I don't think that these types of places are sustainable unless we can figure this part out. Because otherwise we have to keep getting handouts from the funders. Really what we should be getting is water from the roots in the community all around. I think that's more sustainable.
I'm going to set my own timer because I have a tendency to go on. I'm Jason Boat, and again, I'm very happy to be here. I'm most concerned with people participating in biomedical research, very science broadly, and currently I'm actually sitting in a position as an associate professor, which still feels strange to say that to me because that's not my background, and I've done a lot of different things that I think have made it possible to sort of come into the role that I'm doing now and trying to produce research areas that people want to participate in. But for me, it started in a cornfield in Indiana, totally disconnected from intellectual life. I was basically a carpetbag historian of medicine, working with a group at the University of Chicago. And I became an open access advocate then because I had to drive 2 hours to Bloomington Library to get access to many articles that I wanted to read. And the one that I remember the most was by an ethicist at Case Western University. I was writing the history of gerontology at the time. And it said, there needs to be more public discussion about trying to modify the aging process, was sort of the summary of the title. And then I was like, oh, this is great. I want to access this. And it was, it's $49 to access this article. And so I got into open access. And so I think there are a lot of stories like this where people want to be involved. And I was so heartened to hear Jeffrey's story from people who actually make an effort to open their own biology and put it on the web. Jeffrey's story is one of an outcome of that, where it landed in a cyber cafe in Kenya, right, and actually made it possible for somebody who wasn't credentialed and didn't have ethics approval to actually get insight and actually become a biologist. And so that makes me very happy. And so I really tried to focus my efforts on those. And so I worked on setting up personal genome projects around the world, starting at Harvard, and a new effort called OpenHumans.org, and the Resilience Project. And I coined the term DIY Bio and started the first DIY Bio group in Boston, and still work on that. And so my interest is, what are the things that you have to change in order to actually get people to invest in what they already care about, which is their health and the health of their families. Because currently, the rates of participation are essentially zero. And so there are a lot of opportunities, I think, and that's what I try to work on.
A little heads up. Sometimes I tear up, but it's coming from a steady heart. But the eyes betray me sometimes, and so I'm prepared. But I'm strong, so don't worry about me in the panel, even if I'm teared up. And the reason I tear up is because I'm a patient advocate for somebody who didn't have time to do it for himself. And so when I have to say that, it gets me as well, because since I started to be a patient advocate in a short year, last year, we lost 3 of our most driven, generous souls. And so it brings me to the points that I would like to put forth in the discussion. So I was inspired to live, as I said, and as Peter was saying on Friday, we really are, our aim is to bring the patient perspective and the patient focus in everything that has to do with health. So that's what we do at Inspire to Live. Also, with fundraising events, turning helplessness into power for people who are faced with this disease and their families, and try to achieve the most impossible things, like raise crazy amounts of money, do sport events to turn this frustration into something good, into something that really is going to come up with solutions that are important to our quality of life. What I would like to talk in this is, so of course, inspired by the discussions we've had and the talks we've had, the key words. Let's discuss about participation in terms of inclusion, empathy, compassion, symmetry in relationships, bringing in patients as experts of their own health and their own life, not just for storytelling, but really, really to make a difference and to be part of the decision process. This all is accompanied by the urgency to the fact that we don't have 30 to 40 years. So we would like this to be quick, and that's the whole sense of the openness. And lastly, looking for venues of solidarity and developing relevant sensors to create healthier lives for patients, so bringing patients as well to this process. And I would like to give it back to you. So, if about us, not without us, that's what I have to say. So I would like to really invite you, let's talk about these things, let's talk about the things that touch us and move us. So let's engage in conversation.
So that's tough to follow. So I'm a computational biologist in Toronto, where I'm really engaged in trying to figure out how we can personalize therapy and what it takes to make sure that we are giving the therapy that's going to be optimal for any given patient. And optimal means a huge number of different things. Sometimes it means no treatment at all. Sometimes it means giving people a treatment that is just less toxic than another alternative. And sometimes it's about the difference between cure and non-cure of a disease. And so I'm really passionate about how we can figure out how to do that, and do that as quickly and as affordably as possible, so that without needing to go through the long cycles of developing new therapies, we can say we can use what we've already got as effectively and efficiently as possible and deploy existing technologies. And so in that context, I'm really interested in participation across research groups. I do a lot of work in crowdsourced benchmarking. And one of the most staggering findings for me is how often a group will innovate a new technique, and the lag between them innovating a better way of doing something and that reaching broad dissemination in just the research community is 3, 4, 5 years. And I'm interested in reducing that time, being able to find ways in which we can say, I've developed a technique and I know this is a better way of doing something. And instead of making sure that people find out about it because I happened to give a talk in this university and I mentioned it, we are able to get these little micro discoveries rapidly translated. And I'm interested in that in the context of course, benchmarking, but I think it's a broad question. How do we get the little discoveries that can have broad impact to be broadly distributed?
Okay, so that changes what I was going to say. I'm Bruce Arno. I'm a computational biologist, geneticist at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and I work in a lot of different disease space, and I try and help researchers in multiple areas, specific areas one at a time, go forward. And I kind of looked at this whole process of genetic analysis, integrated phenomic analyses, trying to build better models and have investigators work with those. And so, and then make data resources that are kind of reusable about that. I personally put out more than 100 data sets to GEO, more than, 5,000 samples. And now with single cell genomics, each data set is going to be, it starts at about 500 samples. So how do you make those resources a tool like we were talking about yesterday for discovery and then better understanding and then translation of that understanding? And so if you think about the whole cycle of somebody's sick, there's a gene that's figured out that maybe the causal of that, and then that gene fits in a network, and then and then that network is dysfunctional on one side and overly inappropriately functional on another side, and then that gives you a disease progression. Can we somehow put all the data together in a way that now helps the basic researcher, the person who's going to model it, understand more and test something different, see something that they didn't see before? Can we get even results from that to be used to form a new clinical trial, test a new variable, get data back from that, and move faster, and engage the patients, collect more data from the patients? So, and when I see what we've done so far with all of this, having open data and just resources for mining, there's failure points in all of that, and so there's education issues. There's convincing somebody that they really could spend the money to test a new hypothesis. All of these things are failure points, so it's even worth looking at each of those. How do we do better on that? What are the things that we have to accomplish that? Even if, looking at the SAGE, the Dream Challenge type data sets, there's been a fairly high number of those challenges which haven't shown great results, and that there's failure points in there, and actually understanding what it was that led to those not having the informativeness that I think were sort of the inspiration of some of those individual studies, then trying to improve that. That's an area where we're not very good at, like trying to understand the gaps and then improve those. And it really all goes to better data, better sampling of data, different technologies, and then formulating questions maybe a little bit differently, and sort of systems modeling in an organized way that's reusable. And so we have no frameworks for the learning phase when you're an undergraduate, when you're in high school learning science and mechanistic biology. We need continuity of those mechanisms. If you look in PubMed and see how many times ontology, data analysis, and model were used in the same paper, we're talking less than 100 manuscripts. And so that's something that we need to have in virtually every manuscript and every data source, is this model-driven framework.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna come back to that. I mean, that's really
So
important.
Mechanisms for improving failure, and I wanted to say one patient story where the model's wrong. It's a really quick story of somebody's entire life. This is somebody who had cystic fibrosis, a good friend of mine, and she worked her ass off just from the very beginning, when she was a young kid, to keep herself in great condition, and did exercise like a fiend, was a patient advocate for raising research money. We could see exactly what was going on with her disease at different stages, and she had the best care at every, from multiple academic centers. She's at 45. So 45 is a very long time to live with cystic fibrosis, but it's a tribute to just how hard she worked on keeping herself in great shape. And that there's lessons in all of that for how we can suppress disease mechanisms and severity and be healthier versions of ourselves, not just for really severe genetic diseases, but everything. And then she went for evaluation at Duke, which is one of the best lung transplant programs. They have this beautiful algorithm and workflow for staging the patients and whether they're qualified. There's a 40% 5-year mortality after you transplant someone. And they said she's still in too good a condition. But the thing that wasn't factored in her model is how she got to that stage in her life where she really had this just tremendous effort in keeping herself in great condition. So that when she starts to fall off, and any of us, as disease progression goes, and then you're talking about very little reserve left when things start to fall off. And so you've got to have phenotype that's found earlier in the whole process, and then look for things that can suppress the phenotype there. So they said, no, she's not ready for a transplant yet. And 4 months later, with really just one extra little straw on her back, then things went south, and then it was too late to do a transplant. She died on the table. And so that we don't have a model to visualize that whole course. We need something that people can connect to, that sees the whole picture in an integrated way, and then you can make a decision. And so that ability to come out a little bit from the algorithms that are used to make these clinical decisions it's absolutely key. And I think it's a microcosm of the discovery process as well, of seeing something new that's beyond what your prejudices.
I think that's a beautiful example of urgency also. People are dying every day of cancer. I'm Ilona Scheller, a patient advocate by Biavera at Inspire to Live. And I would like to share an example with you. What I do at Inspire to Live. I do the congresses. And you mentioned opening the door for people. Well, that's what we do. We open the door for people. And these are scientists, together with doctors, together with patients. And when you put those 3 people in a room, things happen. And you don't need a lot of money to do that. We are doing it without any fundraising. A little bit of fundraising, but that's just we go somewhere, we go to a company, we say, we need a couple of €1,000 just to get this done, and they will say, okay, fine, go for it. And the example that I would like to share with you, I was just talking about that in the little break, just half an hour ago. And that is at the Pancreatic Cancer Congress. We were talking with the 3 of us, so it's the researchers, the project, the patients, and the doctors again. And we always start with the patients, doing a story about people that died from pancreatic cancer, because that's what's happened. And then after that, there was a scientist talking about his trials. And then he said to us, there are 10% of the patients going into trials. So we asked the question, why is it only 10%? I mean, you're dying anyway, so why don't you have more people in the trials? And then he said, the magic words, well, they don't fit in the trials. The patients don't fit in the trials. And it was quiet in the room, because everybody knew, okay, that's like the worst thing you can say at this moment. And then afterwards, a beautiful thing happens, because then people start thinking, so how can we change that? And even for that, it doesn't take a lot of money to change those things, because why should you do chemotherapy for people that die anyway? And you know that the chemotherapy doesn't work. So why don't you put them in the trials and see what happens? It's always better than just letting those people die. And that's what we do. So with all the congresses we do the big ones, we do the small ones, we just put those people together and we have ideas and we do it.
So, I mean, if anyone has any questions, just shout, or comments. Does anyone have any questions or reflections on that? No. Let me know. Yes, yeah, no, okay.
So in preparing for this, we were engaged in conversation, and something that came up with me was, what does participation mean for us in the panel? And then that's just a small question, because it led to interesting things, and I think it would be amazing when we can have everybody, the discussion we were having earlier, to invite everybody to reflect on that, and to just go into the specifics, like you were saying, like, what are we talking about? Who are we talking about?
So I would throw a challenge out to everybody in this Congress. So if there's any group of people where if I come back to a future Congress and I say, how many people are currently participating in at least one study? I would hope that there are more hands next year than there were this year. This year, there were 3 hands, Steve and John, and they're probably participating in their own research studies, or there's a handful of people. And so you're going to be the change that you want to see, right? And part of it is get your own skin in the game. get in there. And if you don't like something, be vocal. And part of the challenge of architecting participation, there's this concept of architecture of participation, is that we can't even talk about it because nobody's participating. And people don't have sort of voice to complain, except for those who are dealing with very severe, deadly diseases, are really the only ones currently acting. But even understanding basic human variation is so important to inform those cases and all kinds of other cases. You have a mandate before you or a family member gets really sick, and I'm giving it to you now, and I hope that by next year, you will start asking this question when you go places of how many of you have skin in the game, because get it in there, and then, have a voice.
So how do we encourage participation in exactly that sort of thing from more than just this room full of people? That's my first question. My second question is, what kind of information are we hoping to gather when we bring this participation together? I think it's really important to gather data, as you say, about healthy subjects, to get buy-in, get the participation from them. And how do we better utilize the people who don't have a choice but to be participants? If you have a disease, you're a participant. Whether or not anyone is listening to you is another matter, but you are automatically a participant. How do we maximize or rather, how do we draw on the experiences physiologically and personally? And how do we digitize that? It's know thyself in a digital era. How do we digitize? You said that one of the things is the lack of quality in the data. Whose fault is that? I don't know. And how do we improve the quality of the data? And what data do we want? We were doing this in the thing yesterday. We were designing a 3-axis accelerometers, and then you found, well, there's a 6-axis one. What does that do? Well, let's collect much more data than we think we need, and that's where we might find signal that we didn't expect. So how do we format the question of what sort of data we want, and then how do we get it, and how do we get participation from people who have no choice and from people who do have a choice? Actually, there's a question over here.
Well, it's a comment, because you address now 2 issues that are related to participation, meaning how do we increase participation and on what type of issues we do participation, and we focus on data. I think much speed up, you might be interested in data and all kinds of imaging and I don't know what, but maybe not. Maybe there are many other issues that you want people to participate on. So I think it's more important to focus on the why of participation than on the what.
Mm-hmm. We don't have to just focus on one thing as well, but it's important to make sure that we focus on as many different things that are important.
As some understanding emerges and some data comes together, and then the technology increments, what would be the benefit of adding in this technology, adding in the extra 3 axes, these 3 rotational force axes? That would actually open us up to, instead of just gross motor neuron disease, that would also open us up to like Parkinson's disease and other sort of basal ganglia based mechanical impact disease, neurodegenerative diseases. So that, but then you have to add that technology. It's like going from microarray to RNA-seq to single cell on Fluidigm to single cell on drop-seq. Now then the scale just changes of what you can see, and then we have to learn about that, get some ideas, and then see what is there something really important here. So let's say in this ALS project, if we had a mechanism that was connecting these the data, the models, and to some hypothesis generation back to the patients, and say, okay, what about, so autophagy. Autophagy is protein degradation, and it's absolutely key for the health of neurons. If you're going to keep a cell around forever, you have to have just exquisite sanitation services that are provided to that cell. And autophagy is a key one. Could we test that in a population? Could we actually crowdsource the test for autophagy inducers in this population? Do we see a differential outcome in that? Can we somehow connect the data, the hypotheses to real clinical tests, get that back, learn from it, and then go on to smarter tests.
Actually, the connection I think is really important, and it speaks to the question of participation, informed and willing. But you had a question here.
Yeah, so very quickly, I have a question about how we encourage participation across boundaries. So in particular across different nationalities, different whether that be ethnic boundaries, whether that be socio boundaries, or whether that be physical boundaries, because that's, I think we all recognize a big hurdle right now in getting scale. So any comments on that would be great.
Also, I would say different levels of expertise as well, you know, from lay people to very big experts. People often stop themselves.
I just want to ask, your community, your patient advocates, there's a notion of community health navigators in my community, who are people who are not necessarily medical experts, but who are in dealing, let's say, with a minority community. They are the ones who can cross the cultural boundary. They can approach people in their home, speak in the language, collect information from them, and it is almost inevitably what we've seen, at least in Milwaukee, is people who are willing to walk down the street, go into homes, actually talk to people, and do this very basic kind of human-to-human sort of work. And maybe that's a kind of notion that it seems like that we don't talk a lot about those people, yet they do this really vital and important function that allows us to collect this data and cross these boundaries. So I'm trying, how do we empower and enable them more to do that?
So I would like to say this is something really simple. Like you said, it's just reach out. Because what I'm saying, so a lot of people here might know about all these possibilities on what to do with data and everything, but I think that if you reach out also for patients, for patient groups, how can we reach people? People want to also, but we don't know. So how can we work together in order to, for me to be able to translate, for them to, so the discussion begins like that, and it's a more basic conversation that we need to have.
Well, because, I mean, very frankly, right, and just being very frank, like if I walked into any of those communities I'm thinking of right now, or if you did, they wouldn't tell you the answer. They'd immediately not trust you, because maybe you're there because you are trying to track someone who's immigrating or whatever, and but maybe others couldn't. So trust.
Maybe some, but sometimes it's just reaching out.
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes I think we have these preconceptions of, we don't do it because already it's going to be a failure. No, just try, reach out. If that doesn't work, then find somebody in the community who could try to mediate. But I think it's just there. I think people want to do incredible things to help each other. So patients, not only for their own good,
Right.
but for understanding the circumstances of somebody else. We are willing to do a lot because we know what it's like to how to become nurses. So yeah. So and we walk and we invite and we gather money. There isn't to reach out. I think we have to talk like this.
So the answer to his question is enablement of connectivities, translations, and who's going to be the end effector or the intermediate effector of the passage of data, or the gathering of the participation, or the testing of an idea that's coming from someplace that's too foreign for them to connect to. But if we have this connected teams, flexible teams.
One thing it seems to me, I'll get back to you in a moment, and then Stephen. It seems to me that the reaction that you would expect to get is from going into someone's home and saying, I want your data. I want you to tell me about your things. And actually,
that too.
Well, no, but whether you say it like that or not, people will often, that's what they'll hear. Mm-hmm. If we can turn that around and say, what do you want to tell us? What do you want? We want to learn about everything. What do you want to contribute to our knowledge? And the reason that that approach works is the reason that Facebook is so successful. It wasn't Mark Zuckerberg going into people's homes and taking pictures of people and putting them in a database. He was saying, what do you want to share with the world? And that's how it was so successful, because the agency was from the individuals. It wasn't from Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
I would also like to, I think an important aspect that we are not getting to yet in terms of participation is that the invitation to participate is so narrow right now, where it is, in the consent form it says, like, you know, you will not personally benefit, and this may benefit like society generally speaking. And I think being able to diversify the types of opportunities for somebody to realize benefit, whether or not it's education, you're going to learn something, you know, whether or not you actually are going to get personal benefit from it. This goes back to Shasha's comment yesterday of saying, you know, with the identified data, you can say, hey, you don't get any personal benefit from it, to even being really racy and saying, you know, are there entertainment values that can be gained? And I'm serious, I'm not talking about necessarily like a prostate cancer clinical trial, but health is a very big space, and getting people involved in ways that are educational. And I think of, you know, the American Gut Project, and when they launched, they got the food writer of the New York Times to participate, and you could compare your gut microbiome to the New York Times food column gut microbiome and see how they compare, right? And I mean, that's like a nut of an idea there that if you talk to the scientists, they use words like data and ontology a lot, and those aren't the things that are going to drive most people to participate, right? You don't wear a Fitbit because you want the data. Most people don't wear it because they want meaning, right? And diversifying the types of meaning that people can get from benefiting. We have to fight the data fight. I don't want to lose that because it's your data.
Before I do that question, just a quick connection to what was being said. Anders and the new approach he's taking this last year of saying, what are the questions? What do you want? And bringing the questions, I think is in line with this. And I think it's really an important evolution for the stuff that others can be doing. I'm going to direct this to Alona, but it could be to anyone. The field, the force field in which you can actually impact people drops off remarkably. So if you're in the same room, we're working together, there's this element, we can pull it off, we're going to do this. You step back 10 feet, you step back 100 feet, or you step back 1 day or 1 week and it goes away. Yeah. So I think what we have that you see in the passion of the maker movement, you see the passion of the hacker, you see the passion of bringing together in assemblies, is this, you know, beautiful flame that just goes right out afterwards. Yeah. So I think one of the problems we need to solve is how to actually overcome that force field problem of proximity. And so when you hold those small and large assemblies that you're working on, I'm interested to see whether you have, or anyone else here have clues on keeping that energy up when you enter your real world and you go back to things. Because I think Alona, and I think Jim, you've been working on this for a while, so I'm interested to hear Alona and Jim on force field problem and how do you maintain that beautiful energy as you step back from the person.
That is a very, very good question, and it's something we are working on always, because there are always so many things coming out of the assemblies, and there are so many things you want to do. And the only thing we can do is just focus and get just 2 or 3 of them out of there, because as a patient advocate group, but there should be way more that can be done. I'm sure about that. I have exactly the same feeling. The energy when you leave the room, when you leave the assembly, whatever it is here or in Holland, it's so good. And after a week, it's already half, and then it floats away. Anti-pancreatic example. So let's say there was this one patient advocate, it's a beautiful example for this also. And she has 2 children who have the gene for pancreatic cancer, and they're not sick yet. So she's got a huge passion to do something, and she actually put up her own foundation now, and she's starting to get in touch with the researchers and the doctors again to do something about the trials. But that's just one example, and what we do is after the assemblies we just pick ones and we just put the people together. I know from the last assembly we had the flying doctors. That was a really nice initiative from a doctor who put people together, to see what can we do, what should we focus on. So that would be the best thing to do. So you have scientists doing things, doctors doing things, and patients doing things. And for us now, it's the patient doing things, and now the doctors start. So next time it has to be the researchers doing something for us. Yeah.
Do you want to add something? Sure, I'll be brief. So I'm going to do 2 things. I'll give you a personal axiom of mine, which is the quality of our questions determines the quality of our relationships. It just apply to all of life. I just believe that strongly. And secondly, to your question, I think the assemblies are big. There's lots of people here, and we can do some deep ties, and we can probably have a lot of loose ties and some weak ties, and a lot of that will fade away after the day. What we've been experimenting with a lot is the power of the small. And so, like you're saying, after this big thing, can we have tiny collections of 2 or 3 people who can stay in connection with each other and share information after this gathering has happened? We are building these bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger maker spaces and co-working spaces. We've stopped doing that now, and we're just saying, can we make a place that's sustainable, that is really good at holding 5 people, or 8, or 10, at most. And you get some really interesting qualities from this small and deeper and richer relationships. It's easier to make them, it's easier to support them and sustain them, and I think it's a way to think forward about this. And can you, she's been waiting.
Yeah. 1, 2.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to comment on that last part with the theme of the assembly, know thyself. Even if from this assembly, not directly something is fruitful in the sense of working together, small or big, if we are during an assembly like this aware of who we are and what we do, you always bring something forth out of these gatherings, and you bring it back first to yourself and then to the community that you are already embedded in. So I hope we all leave being a different person than we were today, and I would like to, just as Piarella did, I am very emotional right now because I saw her emotions. And I'd like to share that being in this assembly is a very special experience for me, because half a year ago I was victim of acquaintance rape. And since then I've been struggling. So it's not a cancer patient, but I feel somehow very connected, because it is something that from this moment on I have to live with the rest of my life. It's gonna leave a scar, but also you feel immediately that you can become a stronger person. So and I liked what Peter said in his talk, that he said, I am a cancer patient, they call it a cancer survivor. I fully agree with that statement. And so I think that, and what it did to me now being here as a rape victim, is that somehow I feel I'm very permeable, in a very permeable state. I'm super open. If somebody annoys me, I get angry, and I feel I have to contain myself these 3 days, not standing up and scream, shut the fuck up. how can you say that? And I get very emotional by seeing people that bring something that makes me feel strong in the situation I am now. And I also feel how much a sensor we are. So we're talking a lot about data. I think data will be there. That's just fate. There will be more data, there will be more machines. So I think know thyself and our world in the digital era is stay true to who we are. What is the analog sensor we have? A very complex sensor that can sense many things. So also sharing data and opening it up is important, but the link with the one that for the first time saw that data should never be broken, because then it doesn't mean anything, then it's just noise.
Mm-hmm.
So I think...
Then it's just numbers, it's not personal.
Exactly,
not real.
and so if we all just leave this place knowing that we grew somehow, doesn't matter, then it will get somewhere and it will not fade away. So that's...
Thank you for sharing.
What I think it's difficult to speak now. I think it is important to have a keen eye for surprising data, what we call in English, that can sometimes give, it's the harvest of the quiet eye. We must not forget that when Jenner wanted to inoculate Sarah Helms against human smallpox, Sarah Helms said, you do not need to inoculate me because I had cow smallpox. And then I cannot get human smallpox after that. And Edward Jenner, he used 25 years to put that on observation on a rock where nobody could put it away, as Rosenau said, the bacteriologist from Harvard. And in ophthalmology, there is a very beautiful example that explains all this discussion. In Australia, there was a mother who had rubella during her pregnancy. No, there was a mother with a blind child, born cataract. And she went to the ophthalmologist, and the mother said, I had rubella when I was pregnant. Is it possible that there is a causal relation? And Greg, the ophthalmologist, said no. The mother said, yes, but in the waiting room there was another mother who had also rubella during the pregnancy, and her child had also white pupils when the child was born. And Greg did not believe it, but he had the academic mind, the quiet eye, and he went into his patient material, horrible expression, and he found 14 cases. And he published it, and the ophthalmic world could not believe it. They said, but if this is true, if this should be true, we should have known it, but we don't know it, so it can't be true. But it appeared to be true. And Greg became Sir. I don't think that the woman in question became Sir after that, or the other woman. And in Holland, there are sometimes the ladings I put away, and the people get a button between the esophagus and the trachea. And those, they had a society of those patients, and somebody said, I have less bacteria on my button after drinking Coca-Cola. And other patients said, I have the same thing, I also drink Coca-Cola. And it was investigated, it was a, you should not only test hypotheses, but also solutions. But this solution was tested scientifically and proven. And I don't know whether it was paid by Coca-Cola. But the study
Thank you for that. I mean, that's really important in terms of digitizing human histories, digitizing medical histories, digitizing this clinical data. How do we not have to rely on just the quiet eye?
Hi, this comments slightly on a different tangent, but related, trust me, but it's related to the participation theme. There's a lot of conversation about creating, and I think creating is great, but it's actually even cooler to create things that allow others to create. And in that spirit, I want to give a shout out to James. You know, a long time ago, the very first co-creation space that I ever visited was Bucketworks. And it was actually to attend an anarchist found film festival. So I don't know what it did to my psyche. But just this morning, you know, Maria showed a film, and there about Louisville, and I was in that film because that data I was collected was from the Accordion project that I was doing. And Francois was talking about GOSH, the open science hardware stuff, and I was there, and I was thinking, all of these things happened because someone else made it possible for me to be there, to attend these places and these events. I really want to just give shout out to people who create maker spaces and spaces, both physical and virtual, where you know, anyone can go in and create stuff without having the credentials to be able to do that. And a lot of people here in this room have fantastic credentials. I don't have those kind of credentials. But I've been able to do a lot of things because of spaces like this. So, you know, it's the David Lees of the world, and Cheryl Lowe, and James Yu, and many, many other places like this, which make participation and engagement possible.
Because I think spaces are also an important part in maintaining the energy and maintaining connections and maintaining connection. So, thank you.
Let's thank Ed.